I never thought a single evening could make the world feel both impossibly small and unbearably large. I was leaning against the hallway wall of her apartment, pretending to check my phone, but my gaze kept sliding toward her. She was standing by the window, the soft, golden glow of the setting sun catching her hair, and for a moment, I thought she looked unreal, like someone I had only imagined in dreams I didn't remember. Her laugh came from the kitchen, low and effortless, and it made my chest tighten. She was 45, maybe 46, and I was barely 23, but the space between us felt irrelevant. There was something in the way she moved, graceful, deliberate, yet slightly hesitant, that drew my eyes and refused to let them go. I could tell she felt it too, though she tried to hide it with a casual sip of wine. "I've been waiting for this moment," she said suddenly, her voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. She turned toward me, and the light caught her eyes in a way that made me forget to breathe. I wanted to say something clever, something that didn't make me sound like a gawking fool, but all I could manage was a small, awkward smile. Instead, I just nodded because somehow, nodding felt like agreement enough. Her apartment was warm, filled with the soft hum of a world that felt far removed from the chaos of my own life. The faint scent of vanilla lingered, mingling with something richer, older, that seemed to belong only to her. I shifted my weight, trying to keep my composure, but my hands were itching to reach out, to bridge the invisible distance between us. She walked closer, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor, and the sound made something stir in my chest, an unfamiliar kind of longing. When she stopped just a foot away, I realized I had no idea what I was supposed to do. Should I speak? Should I wait? The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was electric. "You realize," she said, her lips twitching with a faint, knowing smile, "that this changes everything, don't you?" I swallowed hard. I did. And yet, part of me wanted to freeze time right there, to linger in that suspended moment where every possibility felt terrifying and thrilling all at once. Her hand brushed against mine as she adjusted a sleeve, and it felt like a spark traveling up my arm. My pulse surged, and I caught her watching me with that same intensity one felt in my own chest. I wanted to tell her so many things, how I had noticed the little hesitations in her laugh, the way her fingers lingered on the countertop, the subtle warmth in her eyes whenever she looked at me, but the words stuck somewhere between my throat and my racing mind. Instead, I just smiled again, and somehow, that seemed to say enough. And then, just as the tension became almost unbearable, the quiet was broken. A sudden sound, the sharp, unexpected chime of her doorbell, cut through the warmth of the room. She glanced toward the door, her hand pausing midair, and our eyes met. The doorbell's chime still echoed in my ears long after she excused herself to check who it was. I leaned against the wall, trying to calm the storm inside me, but my mind refused to settle. I shouldn't be here, shouldn't feel this way, but the pull toward her was relentless, like gravity had found a new center. She returned a few moments later, a faint frown lingering on her forehead. "Just a delivery," she said, placing a small package on the counter. Her voice carried that same quiet strength that always seemed to both ground and unsettle me. I wanted to ask her more about her life, about what had led her to this moment, but the words felt too heavy. I knew she had a past, one she didn't share easily. There had been whispers of a marriage that ended bitterly, a love lost somewhere between compromise and heartbreak. And me? I was young, naive in ways I didn't even understand yet, with a streak of restlessness and longing I could barely put into words. The age gap hung over us like a silent question neither of us dared voice. It wasn't just numbers, it was experience versus inexperience, memories versus firsts. I could see it in the way she hesitated before answering, the careful measurements in her words, the subtle tension in her shoulders. Every glance, every movement, was a conversation in itself. I tried to focus on the mundane, on the hum of the refrigerator or the faint tick of a clock, but my thoughts kept drifting. I imagined her laughter in a past apartment, in a long-forgotten kitchen, and wondered if those moments had shaped her into this version of herself, the woman I couldn't stop watching. I thought about the times I had been heartbroken, small, adolescent heartbreaks that seemed trivial now, and realized they were nothing compared to the careful armor she had built around her heart. She caught me staring and gave a small, knowing smile, as if she could read the storm behind my eyes. My stomach twisted at the realization that she might understand me in ways I couldn't yet understand myself. "You're quiet," she said softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thinking too much?" I wanted to admit it all, the attraction, the fear, the fascination, but instead I shrugged, letting the silence answer for me. There was safety in the unspoken, a shared acknowledgement that neither of us needed to rush, that the tension itself could speak louder than words. Then, almost by accident, our hands brushed as I reached for a mug on the counter. The contact was fleeting, yet it felt infinite. A spark, uncontained, passed between us, and I caught a glimpse of something unguarded in her eyes, something almost desperate, almost tender. For a heartbeat, the past and the rules, the age gap, the whispers of caution, all vanished. And in that heartbeat I realized we were dangerously close to crossing a line we couldn't uncross, yet neither of us seemed to want to step back. I thought I could calm myself once she left the kitchen, but then she came back, holding a mug, and stopped right in front of me. Her eyes were closer than usual, warm but questioning, and for a second, I could feel her breath as if it were meant just for me. I wanted to reach out, to close the last inches between us, but a voice in the back of my head screamed, "Don't. You're staring again," she said, half teasing, half warning. I wasn't. I started, but the words faltered. My hands itched to touch her, my chest ached from wanting, and I could see a flicker in her eyes that mirrored the same chaotic pull. We stood there, frozen in the quiet hum of the apartment, when the sudden creak of the hallway floor made us both jump. Her eyes widened for the briefest second before she masked it with a soft laugh. My pulse shot up. Someone was here, someone we hadn't expected. "I should check," she whispered, but she didn't move. Instead, I caught myself leaning closer, drawn to the soft curve of her jaw, the subtle scent of her perfume that made my head spin. Then, a knock at the door, louder this time, shattered the fragile bubble around us. Her frown deepened. "It's probably just a neighbor," she said, but her voice trembled slightly. I could feel her tension, sharp and immediate. My stomach knotted. I wanted to run, to retreat, but part of me couldn't take my eyes off her. We heard a muffled voice outside, and instinctively, we both froze. The air between us thickened. I could sense her hand brush the edge of mine on the counter, not intentionally, maybe, but the touch was electric. And then, almost without thinking, she leaned just a fraction closer, as if seeking comfort in the nearness of someone she could trust, or maybe someone she shouldn't. The knock repeated, urgent this time, and she stiffened. I should. Her words faltered, and I knew she wanted me to leave, to give her space, but I couldn't move. I was too caught in the gravity of her gaze, the faint quiver in her lips, the impossible mix of fear and longing. I thought about how wrong this was. She could be married, she could be untouchable in some ways I didn't fully understand. And yet, in that moment, none of it mattered. The world outside the door, the rules, the age gap, they all blurred into insignificance compared to the heat that pulled us together. Her hand lingered near mine, fingertips brushing, and I caught her scent again, something intoxicating, older, and so familiar it made my heart race. We were dangerously close. Too close. The kind of closeness that made your thoughts scramble, your mind spin, and your chest ache with desire you're not allowed to act on. Then the hallway light flickered, and we both froze, the knock on the door growing louder, echoing in my chest. Our eyes met, and I realized we were teetering on the edge of something irreversible. One small move, one reckless word, and everything would change forever. The hallway had fallen silent again, but the air between us was thick, charged with everything we hadn't said. I could feel her presence before I even saw her, the subtle shift in the room, the soft exhale she didn't know she was holding. I wanted to speak, to confess, to let her know that I couldn't stop thinking about her, but the words got stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat. "You're different than I expected," I blurted before I could stop myself. She froze, her hand hovering midair as if she had been reaching for something, then retreated slightly. "Different how?" Her voice was calm, but there was a tremor underneath it that betrayed her. I swallowed hard. "I don't know, intense. Magnetic. Terrifying." She laughed softly, a sound that was more breath than noise, but her eyes were wary. "Terrifying?" "Yes," I admitted, stepping just a fraction closer. "Because I can't control it. You make me feel everything I shouldn't." Her lips parted slightly, and I caught a glimpse of vulnerability I had never seen before. Her hand brushed against her own hair nervously, and I realized how thin the line between restraint and surrender had become. "You have no idea what you're saying," she whispered, and the words hit me like a challenge. Her eyes held a storm I wanted to dive into, even though I knew I could drown. For a moment we just stood there, the silence louder than any argument, louder than any confession. I wanted to close the space, to lean in, to press my lips to hers, but the rational part of my brain screamed, "Don't. And yet my body betrayed me, drawn closer as if by some invisible force. Then came a noise from the hall, a door closing, distant footsteps, and a flicker of jealousy I hadn't expected. My chest tightened. What if someone saw? What if someone knew? And yet, more than fear, there was desire. Desire that made me forget everything else for just a heartbeat. Her gaze dropped for a fraction of a second, then lifted, meeting mine again. In that instant, the room shrank until it was just the two of us. Her pulse was almost audible, and I knew mine was too fast, too loud. She started but stopped, her words dissolving into a whisper. I stepped closer anyway, my hand trembling, caught between restraint and surrender. The space between us felt unbearable, as if a single move could shatter the world, or rebuild it entirely. Her eyes searched mine, hesitant, conflicted, and I saw a crack in her armor, a hint of the longing she had tried so hard to hide. I wanted to tell her I had waited for this moment too, that every hesitation, every quiet longing, mirrored her own. And then, just as my hand grazed hers, the tension broke in a sudden, electric moment. The knock on the door from before, repeated, sharper, impossible to ignore. Our eyes snapped toward the sound, and for the first time, reality intruded on the fragile bubble we'd been floating in. We froze. Her hand lingered just above mine, and for a split second, I wondered if we'd ever move again, or if the world outside would finally make the choice for us. The knock at the door had stopped us in our tracks, but the moment it ended, a different tension filled the room, one I hadn't anticipated. She turned toward the counter, frowning as if trying to collect her scattered thoughts, and I could see the subtle tremble in her hands. Something had shifted. "I should have told you," she murmured, almost to herself. Her voice was low, fragile. "But I didn't know how." I froze, my stomach sinking. She never spoke like that unless it was serious. "Told me what?" I asked, my own voice tight, though part of me feared the answer. She hesitated, then looked at me with eyes that were both vulnerable and filled with regret. Someone overheard us. My neighbor, he thinks I'm dating someone my own age." The words hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. It wasn't the danger of being caught that stung. It was the realization that everything we'd been building, every unspoken glance, every brush of a hand, could now ripple outward in ways we couldn't control. I didn't know," I whispered, swallowing hard. My fingers itched to reach for her, but I hesitated, unsure whether the gesture would comfort her, or make things worse. She shook her head, as if shaking off a memory, a whisper of embarrassment flashing across her features. "It's not just that," she admitted. "He told someone else. Someone who, well, they know I live alone. They'll assume things." My chest tightened. The thought of judgment, gossip, the whispers of neighbors, it was absurd, but I felt it weigh down every heartbeat. Yet beneath it, a spark of something more dangerous flickered. The risk, the taboo, it only made the pull between us stronger. "I should leave," I said, though the words felt hollow. Leave, and I would lose the tether that held me to her. But staying felt like stepping into a storm we weren't ready for. "No," she said firmly, yet there was a tremor in her tone. "Don't. Not now." Her eyes searched mine, pleading, daring, and something in me cracked. I couldn't walk away, not when she was standing here, on the edge of everything, and I could feel the gravity of her near me. I stepped closer, the space between us shrinking until it felt impossible to breathe. "Then we just ignore it?" I asked, almost daring her to say yes. She hesitated, biting her lower lip, then nodded ever so slightly. But the tension didn't ease, it intensified. Every glance, every twitch of her fingers, every breath between us was charged with the knowledge that the world outside was watching, judging, assuming. And yet, for the first time, she reached out, letting her hand brush mine deliberately this time. It was a small, reckless act, but it spoke volumes. A promise. A challenge. A confession without words. I caught my breath. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in with a silent warning, yet nothing could make me step back. I wanted this. I needed this. Her eyes lingered on mine, a mixture of fear, longing, and unspoken daring. And just as I leaned in, drawn toward her in a motion I couldn't stop, the sound of a car horn blaring outside broke the fragile world we had carved. We froze again, suspended between desire and reality, both knowing that everything had just become infinitely more complicated. The tension had been building all evening, each stolen glance, each hesitant brush of a hand, leading us to this fragile precipice. The apartment felt smaller now, every shadow sharper, every sound magnified. I could feel my heart hammering, every beat synchronized with hers, every breath a silent plea. "I can't keep pretending," I blurted, my hands gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles whitened. I can't stop thinking about you. I shouldn't feel this, but I do. And Her hand shot out, covering mine, warm and steady, grounding me in a way nothing else could. "Shh," she whispered, eyes locked on mine. "You don't have to say anything else. I feel it too. Every moment, every look, it's been the same for me." Her confession struck me harder than anything I had imagined. Not just desire, something deeper, something older, more real. It was relief, fear, hope, and longing all tangled together, and I didn't know where one ended and the other began. We stood there, hands intertwined, the world outside reduced to nothing more than background noise. Her gaze searched mine, not for answers, but for permission, and I realized that the only choice that mattered was this moment. Fear could wait. Judgment could wait. The world could wait. "I don't care about any of it," I said, voice trembling. I want this. I want you." A faint, almost incredulous smile curved her lips, but her eyes glistened with unshed emotion. "You have me," she said softly. "If you want me." The words were simple, but they carried everything: risk, desire, vulnerability. I could feel the tension in her shoulders, the quickening of her pulse beneath my fingertips. I wanted to close the space between us, to erase all the hesitation, but for a moment, I just let the silence speak, letting her presence fill every corner of me. Then, almost instinctively, we leaned toward each other, a fraction closer than before, but not yet fully committed. Our foreheads touched lightly, and I could feel her breath mingle with mine. The room seemed to tilt, every sound and scent intensified. The faint vanilla in the air, the soft hum of the city outside, the warmth radiating from her. "I've waited," she whispered, barely audible. "And so have you." "I have," I admitted, voice breaking slightly. "More than I knew I could." We paused there, suspended in that delicate balance between restraint and surrender. The choice had been made, not in a dramatic confession, not in a kiss yet, but in the understanding that we were together in this, willing to face whatever came next. And then the sound of a car pulling up outside made us both jump, the reminder that life beyond these walls still existed, that the world might intrude, that complications remained. But for the first time, it felt manageable, because we weren't alone. I glanced at her, and in that look, in the brush of our hands and the tremor in our voices, we both knew, whatever happened next, we had chosen each other. The morning sun spilled across the apartment, soft and golden, casting long shadows that intertwined with the quiet hum of life resuming outside. I woke to the faint scent of coffee and the warmth of her body pressed lightly against mine. For a moment, I feared it was a dream, that the tension, the waiting, the stolen moments had all been imagined. But she stirred, stretching with that familiar grace that always made my heart catch, and looked at me with those eyes that had held vulnerability, longing, and finally, certainty. A small, teasing smile tugged at her lips. "Good morning," she said, her voice still husky from sleep, but steady, calm, as if nothing could shake the peace that had finally settled between us. I laughed softly, a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Morning," I whispered, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. The apartment, the city, even the world beyond these walls seemed to fade, leaving only the quiet intimacy of this shared space. Yesterday had felt like a storm, the near misses, the whispered confessions, the fear that everything could fall apart. But today, in the soft light, it all seemed manageable. Fragile, yes, but ours. We had chosen each other, and that decision had rippled through every anxious thought, every hesitation, every lingering doubt. She leaned against me, her forehead resting lightly on my shoulder. "I never thought it would be like this," she admitted, her voice a mix of wonder and relief. "So unexpected, so right." I tightened my arms around her, feeling her warmth seep into me, anchoring me in a way nothing else ever had. "Neither did I," said honestly. "But it's perfect, in its own way." There was no grand declaration, no dramatic proclamation, just the quiet, solid understanding that we had found something worth holding on to. Something that had been risky, maybe even impossible, and yet here it was, undeniable and human. We moved through the morning slowly, savoring the ordinary moments, the clink of mugs, the soft laughter at inside jokes, the gentle brush of fingers over shared space. Every glance, every touch, was layered with the memory of the tension that had brought us here, and the knowledge that whatever came next, we had faced it together. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something I hadn't dared feel before, that the complicated, messy, forbidden attraction could become a real, grounded connection. That love didn't always announce itself in perfect moments. Sometimes it crept in quietly, like sunlight through a window, steady and warm. She caught my gaze, eyes soft but intent. "So, what now?" she asked, half teasing, half serious. I smiled, heart full. "Now we figure it out. Together." And as we stood there, hands intertwined, bodies close but not rushed, the city outside continued on, unaware of the small, significant miracle that had unfolded behind these walls. We had chosen each other. And somehow, in that choice, everything else fell into place. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?